The most frequent questions I got when playing my Building a Nation save on stream were, how do I build a loan farm? Why won't my players go on loan? And insert funny message from chat here. And although I talk about various tips and tricks that I use scattered across different videos in the Building a Nation series, I haven't actually consolidated all of that into a single video. So this is that video. Hopefully this will take you from a handful of youth players shipped off to an affiliate on loan to a loan farm the size of a small town that has authorities investigating you for starting a cult. I've broken this down into sections so you'll be able to jump around and find the answers to the questions that are most troubling you. We've got general advice, recruitment of players for the loan farm, making sure they have the right contracts, actually getting them their loan in the first place, making sure they stay out on loan, some ways to make those loans permanent in the end, and even a way that you can control staff moves around the league that you're managing in, like some evil puppet master. No, Your Honor, I promise it's still not a cult. So let's get started with some general advice. You know it's a serious video, I'm sitting down. The best time to start a loan farm was yesterday, but the second best time is today. And when you first jump into a save, you're bound to have a couple of players that are sort of loanable options, and there is bound to be a worse team than you. If there isn't, then maybe give it a year and there will be. But the most important thing you can do is just start getting a few of your younger players loans to basically anybody. Let's be honest, at the start of your save, it's going to be a domestic club in a lower division or someone that's a bit worse than you. So just try to get a couple guys out there. It's not going to take too much. It should be fine. That will just get the ball rolling. A very quick note, and I'm mostly showing this so you don't get alarmed, is that if you go past 128 players out on loan, the game will basically crap itself. You'll see here that it's saying that I have minus 49 players out on loan. If you go past 128, it starts counting backwards from minus 127, I think. So you do kind of lose track a little bit. I think this means we're around about 200 loans at this stage. Bear in mind, this is 30 seasons in. You're not going to get there immediately. The best part is if I was to find another 50 loans, this would go back below zero again and thus start counting up from zero back into the positive numbers again. We know this because at one point we had 320 loans. But it is almost as if the game wasn't designed for this type of behavior. It's also very important to have a view in the game that will enable you to manage the loan farm before we get into the actual admin stuff. I'll put the links to everything I talk about here in the description of the video, so you should be able to find it. But this is the one that I use. But the crucial columns on this screen that matter the most are obviously the expiry date of the player's contract and their loan expiry. Not that we need that because these players aren't on loan. Also their loan status, which will allow you to filter by these players. Very important when offering them out. But also the expanded player status box. There are actually two player status columns you can have. One is the one where they all stack on top of each other. We know how annoying that is. There is actually a second box that allows them to stay expanded like this, and my god is it useful because of things like that. Because you can immediately see when a player is wanted, and you'll see this guy is wanted by a team in our league for loan, as is this guy, and being able to see that at a quick glance is absolutely life-saving. Well, maybe that's a bit much, but it's important. And if you've just stumbled onto this video at random, firstly, hello, my name's Matt, let me guide you through this, but also you're probably wondering why any sane human would want to loan out 300 players in Football Manager. And you're probably right, but let me catch you up anyway. One of the best methods to improve your league if you're doing a Building a Nation save is to build a loan farm, which will allow you to get much higher quality players to some of the other clubs in your league than they would regularly be able to attain, because you get them out when they're very bad players, but they in theory have high potential. They then develop into good players to take your league from a backwater league that no one cares about to Malta here, who now have 9 European places. This is a bit of a fluke, but nevertheless, it's possible, because as they get better loan players, they take better loan players because the squad quality improves. Not only that, they also are able to then sign better quality players themselves and therefore can get more money from selling those players down the line and various things. It kind of just snowballs them into being a much better team. I've used it over the years and it works dramatically well, again, as you can see. Right, that's the basic housekeeping out the way. Let's get on to the recruitment of loan players, because this is immensely important. But the way that I go about recruiting players for the loan farm will differ heavily depending on what part of the save and what stage of your Building a Nation you're actually at. From the very beginning, where you're probably managing a second tier side, to challenging for Champions Leagues, winning them and stuff like that. The methods are different. In the early days when you're second tier or just trying to get yourself to the top, or even at the point when you're fighting for domestic titles if you're in a smaller league, there's really no need to focus your recruitment specifically on the loan farm type players, because basically anybody that you can find that has 5-star potential, and let's be honest, at that level, that's bloody everybody who's under a certain age practically, is most likely either going to improve your team in the future, or they might not be quite good enough for you, but they will definitely be able to form part of your early loan farm. And that's the beauty of it, because the difference between 2 5-star potential players at that level could be drastic. One could have 90 PA, one could have 190, but they'll still be 5 stars. So in the early days, just focus on recruitment as you normally would, but with a sort of a keen eye on younger players. This view here that you're seeing and the way that these players come into it will become very important later, but I just wanted to highlight it right now to have something on the screen, otherwise it's just you're staring at my face and nobody wants to do that. Between seasons 3 and 6, however, weirdly, this is when things take a bit of a turn. In theory, by now, you should be pushing up a little bit, but there's also a new scouting method, I say new, it's been around for a couple of years, that I really like to use at this level because it's cheap. And that is the Belgian amateur method. It doesn't really have anything specifically to do with Belgium. We just discovered it in Belgium first. Let me see if I can find an earlier save file to show you properly. Couldn't actually find a save file from Season 6, but I did have one from Season 7, and it should still illustrate my point quite well. I'll also link in the description a video about the Belgian amateur method. It's from like 2 FMs ago, I think, but it still serves the purpose and it all still works. The irony being, I just tried to set this up for Belgium, and as hilariously as it is, because it's Season 7, it doesn't actually work properly. But this is what it should look like. I've used Croatia as an example. So you want between the ages of 15 and 18, contract status is amateur, or contract status is non-contract. For whatever reason, you can't set both of these when you do it through the edit search menu. You have to do it through the add conditions here. It's just FM. I'll put a filter that you can use yourself in the description again, so that you don't have to bother about with this. But basically, you just set it to different countries here, and you'll find these kind of players. And what these guys are basically are young players that are on amateur contracts or non-contract at their clubs. And you can pick up some absolutely brilliant signings from these guys that will always be free, and they usually, because of the low reps of the clubs, want very low wages. I believe it works best between Seasons 3 and 6 if you're using my database setup, because especially in Belgium, for some reason, the Belgian youth team squads for their national teams don't seem to be populated properly yet from clubs like Anderlecht and Club Brugge. So it fills it up with players from these lower clubs, and it generates the players specifically for those national team squads. And it means you tend to get the occasional really good player from them. It's worth a look, trust me. For more details about that, check out the full video though. The point is, it's a great method to use for getting players. For looking outside of Europe, Colombia is absolutely goated for this. Like, there's still 60 guys available in Colombia right now. And I found a guy that turned out in the end, after we checked it, to have 180 PA as a Colombian amateur doing this method. So just to give you an idea. Another weird thing you can do is North Macedonia. As you'll note here, that despite the fact that these clubs here, like Skendia for example, are a entirely professional side, there is a glitch in FM24 that often means that they put a lot of their very young players, and sometimes very good players, on amateur or non-contract deals. This applies to a lot of the top clubs in North Macedonia. It's definitely worth scouting and trialing some of these guys, because you could potentially get some genuine bargains here as well. You'll notice here, contract type, almost their entire first team are on amateur contracts. It still hasn't been patched in FM24, might be worth looking at. And the reason I'm showing you a lot of these is because these are the kind of players that you can just hoover up really cheap in the earlier stages of a save that could get you a nice chunk of players out on loan to begin building it up, especially if you're in a really small league like Malta, where you're not going to have transfer budget and they're probably not going to be good enough to take any players that you do spend money on. So one of the last things you can do as far as scrounging around here is the Brazilian freebies, essentially freebies. And that is this. You basically just set it to players in Brazil, transfer value maximum of 0 between the ages of 15 and 18, and you'll get a nice little batch of players here. Again, I'll share this view too so you can get it. It just gives you an idea of some of their attributes as well as important factors like the amount of games they're playing, and that is key for this, because every year I would just go in, look at anybody who was playing games and was literally worthless, and by that I don't mean they were actually worthless, but they had a transfer value of 0, so they had a contract but you could buy them for £0, and sometimes it's even worse putting this up to like £20,000, because you might get a couple of guys that are insanely good but are like under 10k. We signed a couple of genuine Brazilian internationals, or they were in the future players, for under £10,000 in this save doing this. Now, of course, with this being Brazil, you will still actually have to be able to scout Brazil in order to make this work, unless you want to take like blind punts on players, which honestly can still work, but this is one more for when you can get just enough money to get worldwide scouting, which honestly, once you get Europe or a taste of like the Conference League, that is not hard to get, because you can just dump a load of your transfer budget, if you get any, into your scouting budget. You only need 360,000 for a full year of world scouting, and that's really not hard to attain. I think we had it by Season 3 in Malta, might have even been Season 2. This isn't even a scouting video, but I feel like I need to share this stuff with you because it's just quite useful for building a loan farm. And the reason we focus on Brazil with this, by the way, is because Brazil has a very high youth rating, so even if these are from bad clubs, they tend to sometimes get some genuine monsters, and for some reason this doesn't seem to work in other South American nations. Most of them are better off doing the amateur method. Argentina can be a bit hit and miss, but Brazil is the one. So next up we go to the level where you're a more decent European side, you're challenging for titles all the time, pretty much winning it, and now you've got worldwide scouting, and you can spend, 100 grand here, 100 grand there on a player for the loan farm. Notice that at this stage in Season 7 we had a £13 million transfer budget, so this is exactly where you want to be. But you can have a decent amount less money than this and still do this guy for scouting. So at that point, I just fold the loan farm scouting directly into my main scouting again, because now you can start to triage things, and you can find yourself in this situation. Now, this is an extremely clever view that I didn't make, but it is an absolute lifesaver. A lot of you will be aware of the team report scouting that I do. I made a video about it a few years ago, and it's quite a good way of getting players. It's my favorite ever way. Again, I'll link to that as well. But one thing I don't talk about in that video, because I didn't know about it at the time, is there is a way that you can isolate in your players scouting window like this only players that have come through the team report thing that you have not yet scouted. like manually scouted. And it looks like this. So the age thing is irrelevant here. The potential thing is just to sort of scoop up anybody. It's this bit here that is the crucial part, because it doesn't really make any sense, but it does also work. And what it basically says is, days since Scout Report created is not between 0 and 999, which shouldn't produce any results, but it does, because the team report scouts. Those reports don't actually count as official scouting reports, but it does give you a tiny overview of ability and potential. And the best thing about this is if I was to go and scout these guys right now, they would disappear off of this list and go straight into the normal scouting. But it means that this is constantly updating with the 30-day reports from your team reports. So the only players that will appear in here are players that you've scouted through team reports in the last 30 days. And it's dynamic and it updates every single day, which means that if you're doing team report scouting, you don't have to check them every single day. When it comes through, you can just right click, get new team report, move on with your life. As long as you check this every couple of weeks, you won't miss anybody. But this was actually sent to me by a viewer on Twitch, and what a legend, basically, because this filter makes my life so much easier, and it will make yours as well. Again, it will be linked in the description. So once you're at the level that we're at right now, basically all of these guys here would immediately get scouted, pretty much, because they are all possibly good enough for the lone farm, or might even potentially be good enough for us. And obviously, you can see that at the moment we're in the Poland, Moldova, Macedonia level of scouting, and that's just because that happened to be where we are in the last 30 days as far as our team reports. So this will of course vary, but all of these guys are the types of guys that you can get up very, very cheap. I mean, these guys are all free amateurs as well, which is actually hilarious, because that's the point I was just making about Macedonia. And it just so happens that you could just hoover up these 3 guys for free. They're all like 1.5 star CA. They're perfect for the lone farm. Now, obviously at this stage you'll have to use your own judgment, but I would really be scouting any player with 4-star PA or higher, even on the white star side of things, because you can get rid of a few of them anyway. And it also allows you to ignore large chunks of these guys. You're just looking for guys that are cheap and reasonable. I mean, this guy here actually looks to have a bit of ability about him, and he would be a brilliant player for them, because the idea is either they go out on loan, they develop and become an absolute monster and spend 10 years out loan in the loan farm, or they develop a little bit and actually come back to you in a position where they then can make an impact in your first team. But while they're out on loan, it's raising the squad level of those teams that are sort of on the European bubble. Some of them are actually in Europe, and it allows them to sign better players themselves with the actual transfer budgets that they do have on hand, because the loans aren't costing them anything for the most part. But essentially, once you're a team with these kind of budgets, just sign lots of players, even if you think they're never going to play for you. If they're at this kind of level, they'll most likely get a deal for either a second tier club in your league, or maybe a struggling first tier club, or even higher. Who knows? So you get the general idea of how to get these guys. Just sign lots and lots of players. Even if you don't think they're going to be good enough for you, they could easily do a job for someone else. You just need a very, very large squad. The question is though, once you've got them, what kind of contracts do you need to put them on to get the most out of them? I feel like the best way to do this is to literally go through the process of signing a random player, so you get the idea of the kind of contracts you'd be looking for. Kind of perfect timing actually, as a report has just come through for Red Star Belgrade, and obviously they always have good young players, and you can see here from the team reports 3 new guys have come through with 4-star potential, which is actually perfect for Lone Farm. So despite him not actually being fully scouted, we're going to use him as an example today. Well, one of 2 examples, because you want the longest contracts on these youth players as physically possible, which most of the time is a 5-year plus a 3-year extension. However, if they are under the age of 18, such as Mattia here, that will not be possible. First thing, obviously, we're just going to approach him, and he's... Right, we'll try again. We'll try this guy instead. There we go. Right, we'll just sign this guy instead. Low wages, though, and even has fine loan move in there. But this is quite an important screen, and it genuinely does matter. So firstly, always stick this clause in. Any of these players, most of the time they'll demand it out of you themselves, but if they don't, stick it in there. I don't believe that it actually encourages more clubs to loan the player or to attempt to loan the player, but what I do believe happens, though, is it is going to make the player more likely to accept a loan should one come in. But when you do put this clause in, be very careful not to click that button if they ask for a loan back as part of the deal. If you click accept that, it will fulfill this promise and it will wipe it off the board. So just make sure that you reject any loan back offers from the club that you're buying them from. Next thing it's important to know is if they want a youngster contract, which most of the time they won't, but sometimes they will when you're at the higher level, that means you don't have to do a lot of crazy stuff on the next page. So if you can get them on a youngster deal, the better. Now, obviously, you want to be paying as little money as you can for the player for the longest time possible. And the best way to go about that is obviously, firstly, you want a 5-year deal. If the player is 18 years old, you're able to offer them a 5-year contract. I would get rid of yearly wage rises and any of this kind of nonsense as well. Then stick in your 3-year extension as well. So that essentially gets you an 8-year deal. If the player is under 18, the most you'll be able to offer them, I believe, is 3 years plus 3 years. And my lord, do not be afraid to leverage the power of international wage clauses. If you've got a player who's, say, Spanish or something, and you just think they're never going to play for Spain, stick in a massive clause if they get caps. It just means that you'll be able to get their wages down so low. Now, there's obviously the downside of that. If they were to declare for, say, Malta because they don't get enough games, you are screwed, but that's the kind of risk you run, right? Also, if you're a team that's never going to get relegated, adding a £0 relegation release clause can give you a bit of extra leverage too. But, as I said before, if the player is on a youngster contract with you, you usually won't have to add any of that, and they'll usually agree to the maximum terms because they're just happy to be there. But if he'd wanted breakthrough prospect or future prospect, most likely you would have had to offer him some extra clauses in order to get this over the line. But always try this first. If they revert it, then you may have to give them them something back. With that in mind, it's also important to try to stay on top of contracts to not let them run down too low. You really do want to be keeping at least 2 years left on each of their contracts. That can be hard to do, and this is more of a do as I say, not what I do, because I realize it can get a bit tedious trying to find that. But the main reason you want to do that is because if I've only got a year left, then you won't be able to do the 2-year loan extension trick. Or sometimes you can if you've got an extension clause, but the game gets a bit weird about that. But the reason we do the 3-year extension clause is because it keeps them on a low wage, and that then means you can just tick a box instead. So now you've got the players, and they've all got the perfect contracts in this utopian world. So then how do we actually go about getting them out on loan? Because that's the crucial part, really. Sometimes when the window opens, they will quite literally just come in and ask for them like this. This is just a random team coming in for a random player. That will actually happen eventually, and it's lovely when it does because it means you don't have to do anything. But this is the exception, not the rule. Though when you do find yourself in this position, make sure you go in here and see if end of next season is an option, because that will just give you a guaranteed 2-year loan straight off the bat. And truthfully, if they're a smaller side, it's worth often just knocking this down to 0. Careful though, because sometimes weirdly they will say no when you offer them for free. Don't know why. That guy from Red Star has now signed for us, and I wanted to sign him during this video to sort of take you through the entire process of signing a player and getting him out on loan. Hopefully it works for him. If not, then it is what it is, right? But he's sort of perfect example of it because he joins us and he goes straight onto the loan list automatically. The first thing you want to do though, when one of these players joins you, is get them on the development list. And it's not just a case of adding them to the development list, you've got to set it up correctly as well. So there's 2 things you need to do. Firstly, go to transfers, then director of football, then development list. You'd think it would be in the dev center. It's not. So you can see here, this is a list of all the players that are on that development list. Now let's just try and find the new guy. Got it at the very top, not started yet. And these are the most important factors down here. So to give your players the best chance of going out on loan, you kind of want this to be set as low as possible. So the most important thing is the league, or the nation anyway, and then the league any. So that means any league in Malta. Facilities as low as possible because there'll be some crap teams. This stuff we now leave blank, but you can set it to 0 as well. I found that basically just means unspecified. And this stuff here, you also want to make sure you set up according to your league's rules. Now for us, most of this is already hard locked anyway, but your league may vary. So that's one step. But what this is essentially going to do is, I don't believe this drives up any more loan interest either, but what it does do is allow your loan manager or whoever's in charge of this to take charge of loans when the offers do come in. So he will then decline offers from clubs that don't meet these requirements, i.e., generally speaking, random Australian sites for whatever reason. But you need to set this up on 2 levels. So the other place is in staff responsibilities, and we want transfers and contracts, and then offer via transfer room. You'll see down here that there's a set of settings that basically mimic that which we just saw on the other screen. So I would set it up for outgoing development loans on the senior squad, because what you can do then is if you go to this, you can just have it use the first team settings. So playing time is left everything is unspecified. Malta, league, facilities poor, basically. So what this does is it controls the settings that you're using when you're offering players out, and then the other side of things is it's sort of triaging the offers when they come in the other end, because as much as you might set this up, it doesn't stop other clubs from bidding on the player. So now that he's on that list, we can offer him out. The next thing it's important to think about is the relative squad strength of the other teams in your league and the teams you'll be loaning players to, which could be a bit lower than that. There's no point in offering a guy who's 2.5 star CA for you when he'd be like a 5-star player for a team in like 19th in the league, because they're just not going to offer for him. The game will not believe that it is a realistic signing for them, so they will not even come in because they just simply know that he will not ever want to move on loan to them. That's why if you've got the high PA guys, you really want to get them out when they've got quite low CA, because then they can develop into those guys and they will stay there, but you need to get them there first. One of the best ways to go about finding this out is to actually get team reports on other teams in your league the same way you would do if you were doing scouting, such as this. So you could just go through, get a team report on all the other teams in your division just by going to their profile like that. Hit team report, under 19 squad. Wait, where is it gone? Just occurred to me my scouting budget was set to 0 for some reason. You go in here, go to get team report, and then just get team reports on their first team squad. And then this stuff will all be filled in. But then that will give you an idea of where the players you have sit in their squads. Because it's very rare that you'll ever be able to offer out a player and get a successful loan for a guy who's like even in the top 2 or 3 players at the club. Most of the time, they will sit further down the pecking order, but that's fine because what you want is a guy with reasonable ability that is going to improve while he's there and thus be able to improve the entire team. So if you're at this stage and you're a little bit unsure as to why it's not happening, get a load of team reports for the clubs in your league and then prioritize them much further up the thingy. So by going into team report priorities here, you'll see that Hammer are like 624. Just hit prioritize assignment. They'll be number 1. Do that for all of the domestic ones. It'll take a couple of days to start working, but once you do, you'll get a much better idea of where your players sit in their squad hierarchies. Because a 1-star, 4-star guy might not be great now, but if he can get football for them and become like a sort of 2.5, 3-star kind of guy, that's a big deal and essentially forms the difference between a guy like this, for example, Hosilu at Luta, who may only be 1.5-star CA but has high PA in theory, and then they eventually can become guys like this, such as Wales Zaki, who now has 4-star CA, and all these other guys. They all started out in the exact same way, but it took them a while to develop. But I would never be able to offer this guy directly to Goodger United anymore because there's no way in hell they would believe it to be a realistic signing. And I believe this is one of the crucial mistakes that people make with loan farms is they get too many good players too quickly and then then can't actually get them out on loan because they've overtaken the quality of the other clubs by too large of a margin. You just don't want to get to a stage where all of your loan farm players are too good for the clubs that you want to send them on loan to, because then things get a bit squiffy. It won't be such a big issue if you're in a higher up league. So say you were doing Hungary or Poland or somewhere on that kind of level, you probably wouldn't run into this problem because they've got much higher rep, those clubs, and they'll take much better players. But if you're starting low, like Malta or Andorra or Wales or Estonia, somewhere like that, you will run into this problem very quickly because it is really hard to stop being so much better. God, it sucks when you're this good, doesn't it? And it could potentially be a save killer, but there is a way to rectify it. I realize this is turning into a very, very long video, but at the same time, I know that you guys wanted a proper overview of how you do the loan farm stuff, so I figured that the more detail and more information I could provide you here, the better. Like, I don't want to ramble, but at the same time, I want to make sure that you get every ounce of information that I, in theory, have to offer, right? So, if you do get stuck in this position, you will need a cheap way to improve the squads of the other teams in your league without loaning them players. And there is a way, but it's a bit messy. One of the first things you can do is quite literally just simply go to Brazil or somewhere like that if you have that kind of scouting available, which you should at this point anyway, and literally just take on trial like 100 Brazilian players who do not currently have clubs. The reason Brazil, again, high youth rating, there's a likelihood there's some good players in here. What this does is it essentially puts them on the scouting radar of other teams in your league, and you'll find that a lot of them will actually be bid on by clubs in your division because they may not have worldwide scouting range, but by you bringing them into Malta, in this case on trial, it basically puts them in the Malta scouting range instead. Other clubs can start to hoover them up, and it does slowly improve their squad quality. You can only actually offer 30 trials at once, but once they're accepted and you've cleared it off, you can have, in theory, as many as you want. You're essentially just doing the other club's recruitment and scouting for them, and they're copying your homework. So if that starts to not work for you, basically anybody that has even vaguely reasonable CA or PA from those players, and I'm talking like really not that good but still workable, that could still improve those other teams, sign them up for yourself. But because of where I am in the save at this point, and I don't really have a suitable save file, it's hard for me to show you this, but I'm still going to try to explain it. Once those players then do sign for you, immediately set their asking prices to 0 and stick them on the unwanted list, and obviously offer them out for £0. Because they're such low squad statuses for you, they will not care about this for the most part, even if they've just joined you. The unwanted list can also be found in the Director of Football settings. I'll just add a player to it so I can show you how it works. The sort of players you'd get would end up being guys a little bit like this guy. Obviously, they'd be much, much worse than him because of where we are in the save. Because if you're looking at this chap when you're in Season 7, he's probably 5-star potential. It's important that before you add them to the unwanted list, you can't do that unless they're no longer on the dev list. So I've taken him off the dev list just by that, and now you can add to the unwanted list, and you can just basically sell for any price. If I now go in here, you get similar options to that which you get in the other thing. Set his asking price to 0, which I forgot to do here hilariously, but I have now done it, and he will basically just try to ship these guys out to anybody. You're obviously going to want to do this with a larger amount of players, but you can do it in bulk, so it's no issue as long as you set their transfer values to 0, which you just do as they come in. And what will happen is, and what happened to us is, a load of teams in our league just started coming in for these guys for free transfers and hoovering them up because they're players that they may not have been able to scout themselves, but now that they're with you, they're suddenly aware of them, and they see them as a very good deal because, you know, they're free. Like, we had some guys move doing this that had like 2 to 3 star CA at their actual new clubs potentially, and it means that you can get some really good players. I don't know why it works, but it does. And because of all this, it improves the squad quality of the teams that you're sending them to, and thus they will then start to come back in for loans because their squad is now better and it's catching up with yours. The other weird thing when you do this, for some reason, you will get a load of bids from Chinese clubs. I don't know why at all in this save. I think it happens in all saves, but for some reason, Chinese clubs love using the unwanted list, so you're just going to have to ignore those. Really weird though, but that should hopefully allow you to get the other teams to catch up and get you back on the right track. Now, back in the day, what I used to do is I would go into individual players' profiles every single time and then offer them specifically to the country that you're managing in, rather than excluding foreign teams. For whatever reason, it seemed to work better. However, that got very tedious, so now all I basically do every single time is I know which players are listed for loan, they're all listed, scroll down, I have them sorted by potential, but there's other things you can do as well. So sort by loan status first, then hold shift and sort by expiry, because we've got a few guys that are expiring this summer. This will block us from offering them out on loan. So we'll ignore those guys, select the rest of these, like so, go to transfer, offer via transfer room for loan. Now this technically will still be offering them to foreign clubs, even if you've set it up so that it doesn't. I don't know why it still will. But the reason we use the dev list here is because that will automatically decline any bids from foreign clubs as long as that player is on the dev list. Now, when a player goes beyond the age of 23, they no longer can be added to the dev list, except they can. So this guy here, Robert Sally, for example, he's 24 years old. If I go into his transfer page, I can't add him to the dev list. But if you then go into loan status on his transfer page, onto the retro football bit, you can now use the development list, and that will then add them back to it, and you can do that at any age, which does beg the question of if you can add any player player of any age to the development list, why can't you just do it through the menu? But that's FM for you, right? So those guys have now been offered out. Let's progress a little bit. Hopefully we get some offers. It usually takes a few days. On a side note, I've also found it to be quite fruitful to offer out players for loan on 2 very specific dates. One of them is the 24th of May. Don't know exactly why. It's 7 days before the 1st of June, and I don't know if that's relevant, but it seems to be something to do with loans. And the other one is December 24th, which is right before the start of the January transfer window. It seems that clubs with AI managers, which is everyone except you, are more likely to be looking in the background for loans at that point. And for whatever reason, I seem to get more loan bids on my players from that specific offer out than I would do at any other time. So 24th of May and 24th of December. But that may differ in leagues that don't operate on a normal calendar. So you may have to try to work that out yourself. So you know you're on the right track because you'll suddenly get a load of offers in here. Now, it sometimes can be literally 30 of them, but sometimes it's not. And you'll see here, well, yeah, immediately, this guy here, Mohamed Safar, I paid £30 million for this guy, and he is now honoured by Sleemer Wanderers. He's a 2-star CA, 4.5-star PA type of guy. Bang, instant loan offer. Luta are in for Mendes as well. We can hit them with the double season one because he's not on the dev list. That's why we're being asked about it. If they're on the dev list already, you'll notice that they'll get automatically accepted. More here, another one there. Moster in for another one, but because he's not on the dev list. And the reason he's not on the dev list is because when a player returns from their loan, they're not automatically added back to the dev list, even if they're under a certain age. You have to do that manually. It's very annoying, but it does give you the opportunity to do that. Hybenian's in for another loan offer there. And actually, incredibly, you can see that the new guy we just brought in, Vladimir Filipovic, has actually been given a loan offer. Now, these guys used to be our affiliate club, but they are not anymore, which means that this is a legitimate loan offer. They've brought him in, and that's just how it should work. Once you get this news article, that means you're now free to offer them all out again if you want to, but I would leave it a couple of days. At this stage, it is always worth looking at the player status icons here and noting if you see any wanted icons on players that don't now have a bid on them. Like, for example, this guy here, although it's Man City. This is not really the same, because occasionally, in amongst that batch, they may not have got a loan offer on the player, but they will still be wanted by another club, and sometimes the act of offering them out isn't enough to get the club to bid on them, but it does drive up interest. So if you do find yourself with a wanted icon on a player that doesn't have a bid and actually does say wanted for loan, then you can now either offer them out again or do another step, which we'll talk about in a bit. In fact, no, we're going to talk about it now. One thing I will also say is if you do get a load of loan offers at the same time, like the ones we just had like this, it's probably best to wait until all of these are resolved before you go and offer loads of players out again, as I always feel like the game is bottlenecking itself sometimes, and it won't give you loads of new loan offers until you clear the table. It's essentially saying, no, you can't have your dessert yet, you've not finished your vegetables. So let all of these permeate through and either happen or not happen, and once that's cleared, then offer them out again, and you should seem to get a new batch. But if you do find a player has a wanted icon on them and they haven't had any immediate interest for loan, then you can get involved in a little thing we like to call part exchange therapy. But this is one of the ways that you could get guys like this out on loan potentially. Now, this works really well if the club is actually interested in the player but hasn't actually put a bid in yet and you just want to force it over the line. But sometimes it can work even if the club has not expressed a direct interest in that player. You can also find out if the club is interested in your players but they haven't actually told you yet, or they were recently interested and now maybe have changed their mind. So say we just really want to help out Melita for next season because they're going to be in the Europa League and we really want to help them. This is how we do it. And they've not offered for our players. We'll go into their under-19 squad, pick basically any player and make an offer on the player. What you're looking for is one where it says the club don't consider that person to have a long-term future at the club. If it says future prospect, you don't really want that because now you can offer them out for nothing. But what you're actually going to do is go into additional fees and add players to exchange. And this is where you see the interesting part. Sometimes it will say things like this: players this club have shown an interest in. Now, this guy, as far as I know, didn't have a wanted symbol on him, which is interesting. The other thing you'll see is this: Andres Iniesta suggested players. Now, sometimes these are the same, sometimes these are different. And what you can do is you can go through each of the clubs in your league and do this, and it will sometimes reveal players that you haven't been told they're interested in, and they don't have a wanted logo on with that club, but they do still want them. Now, in this case, Fajero Seni is just a really bad goalkeeper, so I can't imagine why they would want him. But what you also can do is look at loan listed players, like Dedimar, for example, and you can offer them on a 2-year loan. They may say no, they may say yes. Let's see. Bang. They immediately say yes. So we're just basically part exchanging one of their crap youth players for a really good loan player. Now, you can stack 3 of them in a single deal here. So if you know they want 3 of your players but are too afraid to offer for them, you could literally buy one of their crappy little youth players off them and exchange 3 players on 2-year loans as part of the deal. Now, bear in mind, if one player says no, the whole deal falls apart. So maybe don't do it like that. But you can do it. Now, I'm expecting him to say no to this deal. But every so often, the deal will just go through and you'll be like, damn, how did that happen? So let's see if this works or not. There usually has to be a little bit of interest from the club in that player. With these guys, it's a youth contract, so it really doesn't matter. Because if it does go through, you can just release the player at the other end. But I suspect he'll say no. But my lord, for the purposes of this video, it would be insane if he did say yes. But the crucial thing is, if you find that a team you really want to loan a player to is interested in one of your really good players, don't take the risk of just offering that player out. Just do the part exchange thing. If they're interested in the player, it will almost always go through. I just didn't have a direct example that I could show you in this case, because it turns out everyone that was wanted actually had bids for once, which is really rare. Another word of warning about the dev list is that it is unable to decline loan offers from affiliate side. So if you've got foreign affiliates, which you might well do as you're trying to get better youth players from them, say for example Bordeaux here are one of our foreign affiliates, they went in for one of our youth players because they were offered out, the dev list will not automatically recline those. In fact, it will recline? Damn, we leaning back, baby. They will actually accept those automatically. So you may lose a few players a season to foreign loans if that was to happen. A few more of the loans are going out too, which is nice. They're slowly resolving themselves. You will genuinely be amazed at some of the loans you can get sometimes. This guy here is insane. And the fact that we've managed to get him a loan that early is wild to me. Now, what does help is that Sleema are in the Champions League groups this season, which is why they're after those kind of guys and why those players were willing to move to them. If they're in Europe, they're going to be very happy to move there. In the end, he has actually rejected it, as I was kind of expecting him to, which is a shame because he took bloody ages to do it. There is a way to speed things up, though. And I'm going to try and offer him out one more time to a team that's actually slightly higher up that he might go to. He's 23 years old now, which makes this a bit more difficult, though. So we know that Sleema qualify for the Champions League, which is much more prestigious. So we'll see if we can give him to them. Go into here. So they view him as a youngster, which is not the same. That's all we want. No long-term future. But this one, you'll note that it doesn't have any suggestions, but that doesn't mean we can't offer him to them. Lock it in always. Let's see if they go for it. So they do. So he took nearly a week to let us down there. There is a way to do it much faster, but you can't offer them like a youth contract to make that happen. Basically, what you do is you offer them any contract you like, but then you basically offer them an insane wage rise clause. So put like, he's Maltese, stick in like a clause here that means you'll give him, I don't know, £375,000 a week if he plays one game for Malta. It will basically mean they'll accept the contract immediately and it will put all the pressure on the other guy. He may still say no, but at least you find out if he says no in like an hour. So there you go. So we found out literally in 10 minutes that time because we put that clause in. He still says no. It doesn't always work. Sometimes you can blindly get players to go out on loan like that and it just works for whatever reason, but it's really good when you get that wanted symbol on a player that you're desperate to loan, but you don't want to take the risk of just offering them out and not having a bid come in, because sometimes you'll offer them out and the interest will just go away, because there's nothing more infuriating than seeing that wanted icon, wanted for loan, and then you offer the player out specifically to that club and they still don't go for it, and then their interest drops a day later. You've got to strike while the iron is hot. The part exchange system will help you with that. One thing I will say with this though, and you've got to be careful, is when you do this, you can no longer decide how much of that player's wage the team is going to pay. And you might think that's a good thing because they'll give you money. The problem is sometimes they'll give you too much money. You will find sometimes they will pay 100% of the player's wages and will even put in like a monthly playing fee on top. We had one team that paid me £4 million a season for one of my players when I did this. So you've got to be careful. Now, one thing you can do though is when the loan comes up for renewal, you can remove all of that stuff and give them back for free. But it's a bit iffy. It's also extremely valuable, if you can, to have an affiliate club that is in your nation but not your league, obviously, because that's not allowed. Because as you come to the end of the transfer window and you realize that you're not going to be able to get some of the remaining dredges, I suppose, if you like, out on loan, it's important to have somewhere to try to send those players. And a second tier affiliate is chef's kiss for that, especially when you get to the point that we're at where our squad screen lags so much because of the sheer amount of players in it. And when they all come back from their loans, it can get a little bit squiffy. So let's just pretend we're at the end of the window here, because this will work at any point. But the reason we have the appearances on this screen is because I found that if a player has played in any capacity over the course of a season for you or for another loan team, generally speaking as well, that's really useful in January to know this information, they will not ever be able to move to your affiliate club for a loan. And it's really helpful because of a bug you're about to see. So all of these guys are listed for loan. Now, obviously, we can't offer out for loan players that are literally about to leave the club. So we'll just select all the guys that have got at least a year left on their deal. But if I was to now go to squad, move to affiliate, and in this case, it would be Zuri, the game's going to pop up and say, Alciu cannot be loaned to Zuri, except the game is lying. What it's actually saying is one or more of the players that you have selected cannot be moved for reasons that we're not going to tell you. The problem is it doesn't actually tell you the name of the player. It just selects the top guy on the list, basically. Occasionally it will say another player's name. It's still not the right one. You then need to try to find a way to isolate the player that's causing the problem and allowing you to not do this. So if I just deselect him, let's see if it works. No. See, now it's saying Alex Frimpong cannot be loaned to Zuri. But I bet you if I was to select a little group of these guys here, including Alex Frimpong, all of a sudden I can loan them, which means clearly Alex Frimpong was not the problem. But essentially, you've got to try to find a way to isolate whoever that is that's causing that issue. And there could be any number of factors. It could be an existing bid on the player, their contract length, an injury they may have suffered. So it could be these two injured guys potentially here, their happiness levels. There's all sorts of factors in that. But essentially, the best thing you can do really is just do smaller chunks. But it can get a bit tedious. But you can move to affiliate like this, hit Zuri. I will try to find a way to do more though, actually. End of next season on that, bang. Next little batch of them works just fine. End of next season, bang. Point being, it's a bit of a pain in the arse, but eventually you can get a nice chunk of these guys offered to Zuri. Now, what you're actually saying is not offering them so much as giving them to them. So most of these guys will say no, but enough of them will say yes that not only will it get them out of your way, but it will also help Zuri out a little bit. At one point, Dingley Swallows, another of the teams that were our affiliate club before they got promoted, actually had their entire squad built up of loan players from us. Not a single player in their team, or their first team at least, wasn't on loan from us, which made it extremely funny when they got promoted and the affiliate agreement was cancelled. You know it started to work because you'll start seeing all of these same players reject the loan offer, because most of them will. But if you get even like 5 to 6 of them each time you do this, because bear in mind, if you do this, it will improve their squad strength, and if you do it a second time, potentially some of the players that said no before might change their minds. I think every single player has legitimately said no, which might be the first time since I've been doing this that they actually have. Now, normally we were offering to Dingley, not Zuri, but obviously Dingley cancelled their agreement as a result of promotions, so we've had to switch tacts a little bit. But usually that won't be the case, and you'll be able to get quite a few of these guys to take these loans, especially if they're quite poor players. So at this point, the loan farm should be really starting to take shape, and if you've done all the steps correctly, it should be building and building and building year upon year, because the contract lengths are 8 years, and each year you're adding more players to it. There might be some occasional dips where you release some of the ones that never find loans or just aren't very good anymore. That's fine too. But you should eventually sort of reach a peak point. For us, that was, I believe, 320 loans. And after that, it actually started to drop back down again. The main reason for that, of course, was at a certain point, you do want to start focusing more on quality loans than just pure quantity. Quantity is important because the more you can establish those loans, one of those teams is eventually going to start to get some real traction, start getting better and better from that. And you just don't know who that's going to be to begin with. But when you get to the stage that we're at now, or many, many years before this, you kind of know who's good, and at that point you can really start to focus on getting better loan players for those teams. So now that you've got this lovely loan farm, you don't mind it's actually got a little bit smaller since the start of the video, how do you then keep it? And frankly, the best way to do this is with the wonderfulness of what I believe to be a glitch, but who cares, 2-year loan extensions. But in order to actually show you how this works, I'm going to need to go, well, literally nearly a full year into the future, so I'll be back in a minute. So we're back. It's nearly a year later now. We're actually on the 31st of May. I wanted to come back here specifically because this is a very important, well, it's not actually an important date, but it's precursor to an important date. And that is the 2nd of June, because for whatever reason, I don't know why, if you propose a loan extension to a player on the 2nd of June, with the standard loan being the one that finishes on the 30th of June, you will get a default 2-year loan extension rather than a 1. I stumbled upon this accidentally one day because I just happened to propose a loan extension early, because normally there is actually a news article that pops up asking you to do loan extensions. The issue is this appears much later in the month, and often I've found it to be less successful when actually extending the loans of players. For whatever reason, players seem to say no a lot more to that one, and the clubs seem to lose interest. You really want to be extending it the earliest you possibly can, which as far as I'm aware is the 2nd of June. Now, this might vary for leagues that don't have loans that finish on the 30th of June. It seems to be 28 days before the end of the loan, so you may have to try to work that out. But for most leagues that operate on a normal schedule, it will be the 2nd of June. The reason this is important, because if you've got 300 players out on loan, right, having to extend each one manually, because SI still won't let us have a propose all loan extensions button or just extend all loans, it can take an awful lot of time. So only having to do it every 2 years quite literally cuts your admin in half. And not just that, it also gives you more security. So say you've got a player who's out on loan to a side like Sweetie United. Obviously, this is a season in the future now. Say they were to not qualify for the Champions League next year. Some players might potentially not want to go back because they're not playing in the highest level of European competition. But if they've got a 2-year loan, there's no opportunity for them to return or to refuse that loan extension in the middle. And that is really useful, because this exact thing happened to Sweetie at one point. They went from being a Champions League club to missing out on Europe entirely. And because all of their loans were on a 2-year extension that year, it meant that none of them came back and they were able to keep their loan players. And yeah, just gives you more security. But seriously, SI, can we please in F125 have a proposed all loan extensions button or something? It's mad that we can't do this in bulk. But this is also why it's extremely important to have 2 years left on a loan, because if you don't have 2 years left on it, it will not allow you to do it for the most part, especially if that player doesn't actually have a trigger extension option, for example. Especially as sometimes it will ask you for an 11-month loan deal. for the love of God, don't do that. And I will hopefully get an example of one here to show you why you shouldn't. So what I do is I actually make a note. Basically, you want to go into your profile, into Notebook here, and you can create a note. And I have this thing here, basically, which will tell me every single year on June 1st to extend loans. The reason I set it to June 1st is just in case I accidentally hit continue. I don't want to go past June 2nd, but it says basically extend loans. And I know that it's June 2nd. So let's go to June 2nd now. Now, because I didn't actually play through this entire season, I literally just simmed it with myself in charge. Hopefully, we've still got a nice setup that I can use and they haven't recounted all the loans. Now we're on June 2nd. We don't want to progress any further than this. So then we're going to go into the dev center. Then we're going to go into loans. So we're now down to a minus 107. So they definitely did let a few loans go. And of course, I wasn't adding any new ones because I wasn't actually playing that season. But that's still a good amount of loans. Still like 150. So now that we're into the loan screen, the two or the most important columns really are the loan expiry one and the contract expiry one, as well as the number of appearances. This really does matter. But the crucial thing is to sort by loan expiry, because of course, if you're doing this every 2 years on some players, it means that you'll have some for this year, some for next year. It'll always be like a kind of staggered amount. So we want to be sorting it by the 2054 players, because if I switch it this, you'll see there's loads of 2055 guys. But you'll see here, guys that have got a loan expiry date of this summer and a contract expiry date of this summer will not have a loan extension option on them for obvious reasons, because his contract expires in 28 days. But you can see from the quality of these guys, they were guys we were happy to let go. So basically at this point, you just want to go down this list, and you do have to go one by one. I do apologize, but that is Football Manager. Right click on the player, go to transfer, hit propose loan extension, then hit spacebar here. It'll make it so much faster than having to click yes. And then you basically just want to work your way down this list. You can click anywhere on the screen though, at least, so you don't have to like move your mouse around too much. Now this guy here, you can see his loan and contract expire at the same time. So we can skip over that one, go to this guy here, propose loan extension, like that. Just work your way down the list, basically. It takes a little while, but doing it every other year is better than doing it every year. Now, one thing I will say is, for the most part, if that player has played any kind of decent number of games for the team, then they'll almost certainly be interested in a loan extension for that player. And as you can see, the majority of the players you're seeing on the screen right now have played a decent number of games, so there shouldn't be a huge issue here. Just ignoring anyone's with 54 here. Normally there'd be a lot less than that, but obviously with me skipping a year, essentially, there's more contracts that I would have needed to deal with. But then you may come to a guy like this, Roberto Suarez, who's only played one game this season. I can offer a loan extension for him, but for the most part, you'll see that this number up here, actually did change. It basically, if they've not played a game for their club, there's no point in offering a loan extension because the club will almost certainly decline any interest, and it just saves you time. Now, obviously, for the purposes of this video, I'm not going to go through and do every single one of these because this could take me an inordinate amount of time. And let's be honest, you're interested in the information and that's what you're getting. But I just want to do enough of them so I can show you what it looks like on the other side. So there's any number of factors that players can turn down the loans for. The biggest things being the club gets relegated. They almost always turn down an extension if the club has been relegated, or if they've fallen out of a major European competition and they're a really, really good loan player. So say you've got a guy like this guy here, Khalili, 3-star, 4-star even. If they didn't get into Europe, the likelihood is he may turn down the extension. Not always, but often. And that's why the 2 years are very important. Sometimes they'll also turn down the loan because they don't like the contract they're under at their parent club, which is us in this case. They just think they're Billy Big Bollocks, basically, and there's just not a lot you can do about it. But anyway, the reason we do it now is because of this. All of a sudden, every club and their mum basically wants to loan those players again for a second season. You'll notice I have none of them that declined. That's because I avoided any that had basically played no games. Now, the key thing is, this is why the 2nd of June is so important. If I'd have done this on the 4th of June, this bit here would have defaulted to end of season. You'll note that it's weird because you'd think end of season would be this season, but it's not. It actually means next season. Now, there is a 12-month option here, but the cool thing is, if you do it on the 2nd of June, it defaults to end of next season. And you're sat there thinking, well, that just means the end of the season coming. It doesn't. It means the end of the season afterwards because we're over the tick-over point. And that's why it's so powerful. But for some reason, the 2nd of June is the only date that lets you do this. And the reason this is crucial, because you might think, well, okay, I could just go into each one and click end of next season. Except if you try to do this on the 4th of June, for whatever reason, it will not let you do that. It becomes grayed out. So that's why it's crucial. So you just go along, accepting all the offers like this. You notice they're all default to end of next season. Sometimes they'll offer money in here, and this is your opportunity to potentially remove that money. Really good example is this guy here, £6,000 a week they want to pay. We're trying to help them out here, so we're going to say no. Occasionally, they will just randomly back out of the negotiations there. I don't know why. I think it's a glitch in FM. I've only ever happened twice, but it's annoying. So you just go through and do all that. Now, sometimes, if you've left their contract too late and they only have 1 year left, it will default to an 11-month loan here. Go in, if that happens, go in and change it to 12 months. You won't be able to select end of season because you can't at this point. Change it to 12 months for the love of God. And then as soon as you can, offer that player a new contract on a nice long-term deal. It means you'll only get a 1 year loan out of them on this particular occasion, but it will stop something horrendous happening. And that is that if they're on an 11-month loan deal and you let that go through, they will finish like a month before, and it will happen in May. With those May loans, you have zero opportunity to propose a loan extension. They will always come back, and I find in that next summer, it's almost impossible to find them a loan. So yeah, never ever do the 11-month loans. If you see it and it will default to it for whatever reason, always change it to 12 at least. That will hopefully dig you out of that hole. But yeah, we just accept a load of those. Another potentially faster way to do it is just to go to this screen and just tick on the green arrows, which is ironically, after years of playing this game, is something I've only just thought to do at this exact moment. So welcome. We're learning new things today. That's just slightly quicker because you have to press a little bit in the right place otherwise. So that just accepts all of those loans. And sometimes it can be like 150. So do bear that in mind. It's a lot of clicking. It will then take a couple of days for them to start going through, talk to the clubs, and eventually they'll work their way out. The crucial thing is they will be done and decided long before you would have even got that news article asking you to extend loans. And that's crucial because half the time, if you had a load of loans out before, if you did them from that news article, they'd come through so slowly that sometimes the extension option wouldn't even come through before the loan had finished. You'll see here a couple of them have rejected their loan extensions because things happen, but also you'll see that some of them have. And then you just have to go through and accept and then just tick them off, basically. They'll all go through like that. Annoyingly, the game gives you zero reasoning as to why they've rejected the loan. I would be loving it if they did tell you, but it doesn't because reasons. So just on the final topic of the loan situation in this video, before we talk about the staff farm thing briefly, and that is the pipeline of moving some of these guys into permanent deals for these clubs, because if they have a permanent asset, they can potentially sell them. Now, the loan farm element of the thing means you have control over their contracts, so they can't just get a good player for a year, sell them on and become worse. At least if we have control of the contracts, then at the very least we can keep them good. However, sometimes it does make sense to sell the player to them permanently so they can either develop them themselves, get some money off our wage spill, and we get a little bit of money back, though I do tend to take less of the cash. And the other good thing you can do is it then gives the possibility that they can then sell that player on for a large profit, which can help them in the long run. And all you want to do basically is go to every single player that is on loan. So when you're on the screen, obviously you want to make sure that you're showing the players that are on loan. They'll all appear in purple. First, sort it by the loan expiry date. That will isolate all the players that are on loan. You're going to want to just grab a random selection of these guys and then holding control to deselect anyone's with the 54 expiry date. FM is a pain in the arse, and randomly sometimes we'll just deselect what you've got selected despite you not touching the keyboard or the mouse, because obviously you can't offer out for transfer players that are leaving in a minute. So these guys are all out on loan. Then you can go into transfer here and offer via transfer room, and if you hit transfer like that, 37 players in this case, what that will do is it will offer them out for transfer, but because they're on loan, it will only offer them to the club they are currently on loan at. Now, if you do this randomly in a transfer window, you will probably get a couple of bids, but doing this on the 1st of May and the 1st of November, for whatever reason, seems to get you more bids. But out of those 37, I guarantee you we will get a couple of bids. Even now, if I'd done the entire batch of players out on loan, we would obviously get a lot more because it's like 150 guys offer. Now, they've offered £20 million for this goalkeeper here because they actually have that kind of money, which is mad. But because they're a team in your league, you could give them a favourable deal and knock the deal down to, say, 7.5 million if you're being extra fancy, you know? Because remember, they've got to have contracts on the other end of this. Again, that's another one there. Bang, another one there. £20 million. Bang, another one there. You can drop them down. Look how many offers we got just off of that one set of players I offered out. That's actually more than I was expecting to get, to be honest. And that's all from teams in our league that are willing to take these players off of our hands on permanent deals. You could rack up quite a lot of cash here. Now, I wouldn't, because you don't want to put them in huge financial trouble. If anything, it's an opportunity to get a little bit of money off the books, like firstly the wages, get a little bit of money back for these guys, and also allow these clubs to have some permanent assets. And that was the amount of guys that I just did with 37 players. Imagine what would happen if you did that with 300 players. So the very last thing, and thank you for sticking with me for this, I know this has been a long time with this video coming out, you can start to understand, given the length and all the things we've discussed, why it's taken so long to make this. That and losing all the footage for a week, which was great. But the last thing I want to discuss is the staff loan farm, I guess, because you can actually have a control over the staff appointments of other teams in your league as well if you really want to play the meta game. And well, if you got this far, you probably do. So we found out randomly that after a certain point in time and our reputation grew to a certain level, the other clubs in our league really enjoyed signing new managers from our coaching staff, more specifically our under 23s and our under 19 coaching staff. And once we realized this was the case, we decided that there could be some things we could do to potentially allow them to get better managers, because often they would just appoint the same guys over and over again and they weren't very good. Now, I find the under 19 coaching staff is especially powerful for this, but it does work with the under 23s as well. It doesn't seem to work with your full first team coaching staff, and I suspect that's due to the reputations of the player or the coaches. We initially noticed that there is a very rare tendency that can be found on certain managers and coaches, and that is uses loan market. Now, this is quite important, or we certainly thought so at the time, as our idea was, what if we seeded all of our under 19 coaches and under 23 coaches coaches with guys that used this potential thing. Now, unfortunately, it isn't searchable in the game, and we actually had to have someone make a specific tool that will allow us to find these guys, and in the end, we don't believe it actually showed any results beyond the normal stuff. However, we had sort of proved a point, because some more testing seemed to show us that certain managers with certain playing mentalities and certain formations seemed to do better in Europe, and we believe this was mostly down to underdogs and taking risks and stuff. So we found basically that guys that had a playing mentality of adventurous, which essentially equates to positive, or attacking, but that only seemed to work with the better teams, seemed to perform better in Europe and get better results, whereas guys that had cautious or very cautious seemed to be absolutely useless when it came to European games. Every time we had a team qualify for Europe who had either a very cautious or cautious manager, they would do utterly shockingly, whereas guys that had adventurous, for the most part, seemed to overperform massively. Now, again, that's a little bit apocryphal, but it did seem to pay out very consistently. So the next strategy was, cool, let's hire a load of guys to our under-19 coaching and our under-23s that all had adventurous playing mentalities, and that's actually something you can search for. So what you can do in here is, this is just a standard staff search, but I've got it set up for guys that will be willing to join our youth team, and that's where they're going to be going. That's the under-19s essentially. Now, the staff role, despite the fact they're going to be coaches, is actually set to manager, and this matters a lot. Let me just use my coach filter, but then I've managed to filter it by playing mentality is adventurous, and that means that, well, every one of these guys has an adventurous playing mentality. So at that point, you can just choose someone who's actually good. You'll note here that there's a few that have already permeated through the Maltese hierarchy here, and there's tons more. It's just they're not available for us right now. So at this point, we could just literally go for the very best guys that are on offer by using the ratings and that, bringing them in as our under-19 coaches and our under-23 coaches. Now, the reason we're looking for managers is because of this. If we go after this guy who looks like a really good manager, we go approach the sign, he wants to be our under-19 manager. However, if we set him as an under-19 coach instead, lock it in, he will ask for a slight change of money there. Make the contract a bit longer, could probably bring that back down again. The reason it matters that they're set to being a manager and not looking specifically for coaches is because what he actually wants to do is to be a manager, and that means he's more likely to be picked up as a manager by other teams in our league, and that's really, really crucial. And just to give you an idea of how powerful this is, I would say when there was a sacking in Malta, there was around a 75% chance that the manager that they appointed next was a guy from either our under-19s or under-23s, or a guy who had previously been in our under-19s or under-23 coaching system. That's how powerful it became. You can truly puppet master it in any way you like, but I found particularly adventurous playing mentality, the loan market thing if you can find it, but genuinely at one point out of like 10,000 coaches, there was like 10 guys that had that, so it's pretty rare to find it. But for me, it's only ever worked for coaches. It's never worked for assistant manager or anything like that, or the actual manager. It's only coaches. That's why you want to get guys that like being a manager but will accept being a coach, and never for the first team. Oh, bloody hell. So there we go. Hopefully that is everything I know about the loan farm and how to build one. This video feels like it's going to be an hour long. Hopefully it's not, and I've edited it down a little bit for you, but there was just so much I wanted to cover here, and hopefully this is now like that all complete. I mean, obviously we'll find some stuff next year probably with FM25, right? Hopefully there'll be some new things to do, and a lot of this stuff might not apply, but at least if you're going to do one of these for the rest of the year, you've got the information here. Yeah, any questions, drop them in the comments. I'll try my best to help you out, but hopefully this should cover everything. If you're new to the channel, drop a like and subscribe. That would be lovely. I've got more stuff coming up after Christmas. We can get back to some more story-driven stuff, so stay tuned for that, along with some other things too. I'll see you guys very, very soon. I'm knackered now. Hold your gun. Capybara. Bye-bye.